Hi, everyone.
How's it going?
Go for it.
Yeah, I guess. Welcome to another episode of Full Blast. We have V here with us today. So excited. She's done a lot of other great interviews on the channel. She's the one who brought me onto the channel in the first place. So thank you so much for that. This has been super, super fun for me and a great way to connect with a number of different community members. So let's give it up for V, the resident sleep expert between the two of us.
It's been really interesting that like the way that Evelyn and I approach things, and then you blast play and you just like full speed ahead. I do like so a little bit of technical stuff in the beginning. I think we have the wrong link dispersed to places. I just realized.
Okay. We can repost the link.
Yes. So just a little bit of technical.
Yeah, dig it.
I just don't know which one we're on right now. Found it.
Found it. Great.
Okay. I'm gonna update.
Great.
Hopefully that works. Okay.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, regardless, this is going to be on the channel.
Something's happening. Yeah.
Forever, So I love it. Let's get in. Let's talk. Hang on. So I got a pillow for my hand.
Oh, God.
Sorry. If you thought that the MF goofball wasn't going to do some MF goofball nonsense, then you are severely...
such bad punnage.
Severely mistaken.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So, yes, if you're just hopping on, we have viewers. This is so exciting. I want to do a deep dive on sleep. So for people who, I haven't been on the platform in quite a while. For people who don't know, my full type is double masculine, SEFI, consume sleep, blast play. So double activated, double feminine sleep, and F sleep.
Yep. But crucially, glass lizard.
Oh, yep, glass lizard and info dominant. So you know that I'm going to be like with the info.
Well, I think the reason that I bring up the glass lizardness with you and sleep is that your approach to sleep as an ESFP, right? Or as a lead, as an EP, as a lead SE, it's not like you're savior skibbing, right? Right? Because you have this big gather muscle at the top, but you're doubling up on an animal that forces you to use your last function.
Yes, and I think that's the interesting thing where like there is a lot of I take in all of the information and then deep processing, and then I come out and blast with it, right? And then eventually I'll get around to playing. And play is definitely like a big problem for me. But that's one of the things that I want to be doing here is that like I got my type almost 2 years ago. I've had a lot to sleep on, and there's different parts. So like I was really active in the community for a long time, started this channel, started the podcast with Evelyn, and then kind of taken a break this year from like being so active in it.
Great.
Partially because I wanted to limit my consume. So I deleted Facebook off my phone. Yay. But there's also like all of like watching everything play out in life and the friends that I've made from the community that I'm still in active contact with and seeing the kinds of things that are happening. I've sleep processed this to shit. And as I'm going through my flavor of my hero's journey right now, and I'm seeing how things are playing out, I just had this like perfect analogy for sleep and how to sleep. And, our blast is NT blast, right? So it's going to be an analogy machine. Even though I'm saying your SF, the blast is going to be an analogy.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I never use analogies. That's just not
never.
Right. God.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to share with you guys. And I have a rough outline because at the end of the day, I do have Demon Blast, so pulling the shit out of my ass is scary. So I do prepare a little bit.
Love it.
So I wanted to share it with you. And if anybody has any questions as we do all of this, you guys, we're paying attention to what's going on in the chat. So if you do want to say anything,
I gotta fix one thing.
Yeah. Oh, look at those moons behind. That's so awesome.
Great. I had to turn off the air conditioner because now, oh my God, hair, what are you doing? There we go.
You know what? Your hair is getting to Thomas Alot levels.
Yeah,
it's some great going on there.
Some swoopy realness. I'm very into it.
Yes. I've got I've never cut my hair this short before. She cut it a little too short here. So when I walked out of the hairdressers yesterday, I'm like, I need to feel feminine. So I'm going to go put on makeup for the first time since the pandemic started.
Real. I love it.
So, okay.
What do you want to start?
Blaster lessons and, pipe in with questions, force me to play a little bit. Although we're both info dominant, so this is going to be just alternating blast and consume.
Woo!
Yeah, it is. Okay, so at its core, what is sleep, right? So there's a couple of parts to it. It's your OI and your DI. So whatever your OI is in your stack, whether it's NI, SI, and then your DI, your values or how you go about thinking, thinking or feeling. And then, so there's the OI and DI part of it, and then there's the letters attached to it, right?
Sure.
All fairly straightforward. And then how I've kind of come to see it is that it is how those things combine ends up. So our DI, this is interesting. Evelyn and I had a ardent debate on this conversation because I use DI interchangeably with identity, but your DI is not exactly your identity. And Evelyn with masculine SI, she was punching over that because that is not the definition, right? So we had an interesting conversation about that. And ultimately, she's totally right. Our DI is not the same thing as our identity. How I've come to see this is the way that we go about our sleep processing and how our OI and DI combine kind of is the foundation for our sense of self and our foundation for our identity.
Okay.
And this is going to make more sense once I get to the actual analogy I'm trying to make.
Great.
Which I realize I think I'm going to need to share my screen for. So I need to turn off notifications and make sure I don't have any
extracurricular tabs open.
Yes. Let's go with that.
I kept it vague. You could be, I don't know. There are a million extracurricular non-OP related things you could have open right now.
There certainly are. And I'm pretty sure I don't have anything inappropriate. I'm actually far more worried about any revealing information, identifying information. But I think, oh no, my email is open right there. I should definitely close that. Yeah, did not prepare nearly as well.
It's all good.
Yeah, hold on. So it's interesting. There's a couple of different ways of approaching this. And I work as a software engineer. So the way that my brain arrived at this analogy was through software. Sure. But there's a more layman's term of it, which is, so let's go with mind map. Are you familiar with a mind map?
Yes, I am loosely familiar with the mind map.
So another way of thinking about it is for people who are more STEM-minded is a network graph. So you have, I'll show my screen, as I kind of explain this. And just for, okay, share screen. And world, let me know when you can see my screen.
Love it. Oh, so, it's so pretty. I love
So this is just a random mind map that I got off of Google, right? So I don't really know what's going on here. But a mind map or another network graph is essentially like in more technical terms. So this is what I used for our cover.
That's what. Oh,
yes. So you have all of these like little bits here, right? And this is in technical terms, this is a node. And then the node is connected to other nodes, right? So in the context of like OI and DI, right? So the OI is that you're organizing all of your information, which makes sense, right? So all of this being organized, that's your OI. And the DI is whether it's your thinking or your feeling. So these are all little nodes and how they come together and interact. So for example, with FI, because you and I both have FI, so I'll go with that one. I'm sharing a boring part of the screen, sorry. I'll stop sharing, you guys get the idea. Yeah. So with feeling, for example, if you have a value of understanding, if you have a value of compassion, right? Those would be the little nodes. And then how they come together and how they interact would be the OI. So that is how I think the OI and the DI come together. And then it has different flavors depending on your letters. So my shorthand for the letters is, and has been for quite a while, obviously there's a lot more depth and nuance to it than this, but sensory is what, intuition is why, feeling is importance or priority, and thinking is how it works.
Okay.
So if you have
hit me with that one more time so I can write that down.
Okay. So intuition is why. Sensory is what. Feeling is importance or priority. What is important? Where is the priority? And then thinking is works. How does it work? So those are kind of like the shorthands for the letters and what these letters try to answer. So as an SF, I'm constantly looking at what is important. What is important? What is important? What is important? That's what I'm constantly doing, right? As an NT, you're trying to constantly ask, why does it work?
Yeah.
Right?
Why
you're
does
not
it
asking
work?
what works, but you're asking, why does it work?
Oh, shit. Okay. Wait, and then you can bang the blocks.
Bang which blocks? Yes.
You can bang all the blocks together, right? NF is why is this a priority? SF is what is the priority?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And then you add okay, go on. I got very excited.
I love the excitement. By the way, I love that you have the 3 little masks hanging behind you.
Look, wear your goddamn mask, people. Wear a mask. Wear your mask.
Guys, I don't think this needs to be said, but like, wear your goddamn masks. That should not even be an issue. Anyway, PSA over. I don't want to go down those rabbit holes.
As two Californians, it is our moral obligation to do the PSA. Anyway, please continue.
That's true. I can start laying on some guilt too if you want some self-righteous bullshit. But I'll put that aside for now. So when you combine these letters as applied to your sleep, and when you start thinking about like identity, for example, so you and I both have NF sleep, right? So where our identity is concerned and where our sleep and processing is concerned, we're constantly asking the question of why is this important? Right? So that is what our identity is sort of built upon, is knowing why the things that are important, why are they important? What are the threads that run through what's important? And then, so for example, somebody who's NT sleep is going to try and understand why things work, right? In a deep kind of sense. So a lot of people who are NT-sleep, and I notice this with ST-sleep as well, just TI overall, they have, I think that's why, I think Benjamin talks about this frequently, is truth, TI as truth, but it's not truth. It's just that, like, you need to have a network, like a graph in your head, a network graph, or a mind map, or whatever it is, of like, hey, if this is how this works, and this is how this works, this is how these two come together, right? Sure. And so that's, you understand what works, that's your T, and then and then the what is, or the why, whatever it is. That's how all the things are connected. So, like, that's kind of the broad strokes of this.
Yeah.
The interesting part, and this is where I think it's the sleep processing, and why it's not just a one-stop shop, and it's a constantly growing and evolving thing, is that when one of these nodes, say you have a particular value, and for whatever reason it shifts, you need to go in and do the work of remapping all of your nodes, and everything that was attached to that node that is now not attached to your map. You have to go through everything and everything and kind of check it. Like, hey, is this still important? And if it is, attach it somewhere else. And if it's not, then you got to let it go.
No, I hate it. I hate it. Video over. This stopped being fun very, very quickly for me. As somebody
were you expecting it to be fun?
Look, as somebody who has NF sleep last,
it's hard.
But I think that you draw a really clear picture of why it is hard, especially for somebody like me who has NF sleep last, someone like Shan who has lead ST play, is because we're so adept at seeing what works in reality, right? Because not only do we have Savior ST, right? So we are just naturally attuned in general to what works. They're not, they're nodes, but in an extroverted sense, right?
And I think that's one of the, hi guys. Sorry. You see the comments?
I did not see the comments.
Josh, I'm assuming that's Josh. He's just saying hi. Love you guys.
Nice. Hey, Josh.
Continue though. The ST, when it's play and it's extroverted, we don't go deep. We don't bother with organizing, because we just take something and then we throw it out, right? So ST play is going to look really different from ST sleep, which is going to want to build that map and that network of how everything works and comes together. Whereas our ST play doesn't care about that.
And at least one of the big things that I ran into is, I think, just Western civilization in general really rewards an ST play approach to a lot of things. It's like, take in something, see if it does this thing work. If it doesn't, throw it back. Oh, let me try it again. Oh, this works. Let me use it for as long as it works. But then if something else comes out, let me throw this to the other person, or someone throws me a new thing.
That's a really good point.
It's intensely productive.
Right. Not necessarily in a building kind of way.
Exactly. But like, yes, you are creating things, and yes, things are happening, but it doesn't have what you're talking about, which is this this really strong sleep foundation of like, yes, I am laying this FI brick, and it is there, and this motherfucker is not moving. Cool. What bricks connect to that brick? And now
And I'd actually make the argument that I think overall Western society is just more play-oriented, not even ST play, but just more play-oriented. And I think we don't, because we're so productivity-oriented, we don't really have the same, we have this value of like, know who you are, right? But there isn't quite the same value of doing that deep work that is necessary to know who you are, and to, not in the way that I think that there is with other societies and cultures that I've encountered.
Yeah. And I don't think that, at least as Blaster history lesson. I was terrible at history, so like, please take all of this with a shaker full of salt.
You're blessed at the top. I think I take everything with a shaker full of salt. Have you actually consumed that information?
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's fun. I love it.
All that said, of course.
All that said, I think that this very play-focused phenomena that we were observing, I think that it's maybe more acute now than it ever was with the technology and the LinkedIn and the social media. But like, I definitely see a lot of threads of this kind of behavior of being encouraged, right? Like, we wouldn't have, Henry James Thoreau meditating on nature 150 years ago, or whenever it was, if he wasn't responding to what you're talking about, this extroverted play energy, don't build, just,
and I think that, like, I mean, obviously I'm also at this point pulling shit out of my ass, but like, I think part of that probably comes from our like Pilgrims and Puritans and all that stuff, that the origins of American society. Because like, I mean, I grew up in the Northeast, very kind of waspy culture. Yeah. And there is very much that like ST, go do the thing, have the work ethic. Like nobody gives a shit about how you feel about it. Go do what needs to get done. Yeah. Right? There is very much that like, oh, is this your identity? Good for you. Go do what your family needs you to do anyway. Yeah. Right. So there is that kind of like, I think, cultural history that American culture, at least more specifically, has, and British culture and all that. Right. No, but I think that it's weird. Like there's this weird paradox that probably precisely because we are so discouraged from investing in that NF sleep, let's just say sleep. And I think that we are discouraged from investing energy into sleep. And I think that we are discouraged from investing energy into NF, right? As far as like culturally, right? Yeah. I also think that's very much a generational thing. That also, I think our generation, like, I mean, we're getting better. Millennials and NF hippies, I think, they're not strangers. No, but look, my boomer parents, they are both kind of iconoclasts in that, they're older, but they've always had more of an NF bent to them than ST, even though their parents were very, very, very ST, right? But I think that there's something so powerful about developing an NF internal world, let's call it, right? Where it isn't just, I have all these different nodes. It isn't, I have this map, but there's nothing attached. But like when you really do both of them in the face of all of this ST play nonsense, I mean, that's power, man. Like now you have that NF sleep, get out my way energy. Yep. Right? It's because you know what you want. You know what you want, man. I know that you have the NI of what you want, so it's enduring, right? It's not ephemeral the way that sensory is, at least SE. Yeah. But and again, also, I mean, like, to keep in mind, you and I are in the same quadra, so we both have NF sleep, right? And so, especially for you with NF last, that is going to be the thing that propels you forward in life, because when you can NF and when you can build your graph of your values and how they all interconnect and all of that, then it will inform how you go about ST playing, right? Whereas I have the opposite challenge in my life of trying to summon up the play because I'm constantly NF sleeping. But then also other people, wherever it is in their stack, if you can, it's the triangulation that's bringing both into play, especially for info dominance, because one of our energy animals is going to be super bad, right? That's going to be the big thing that propels us forward in life. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is I 100% agree, but also you're preaching your demons, which is one of the reasons this feels so powerful to you. Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, that is a very, very good point. I'd be curious. I'm curious about how you sort of see the
So we talked a lot about sort of the info dominant side of sleep energy, right? You having sleep savior as an info dominant. I have sleep demon as an info dominant, right? Even though it isn't first or it's not first for us, right? But we're doubling up on it. How do you see that playing out? Let's just say savior sleep, for instance, but in somebody who is energy dominant, right? So who's someone who doesn't have play last. How does that building sort of happen for them, do you see?
That's a really good question. I think I'd have to think about that one some more.
Fair enough.
Because my first reaction is you still have to build the mind map or your network graph, whatever you want to call it. You still need to, and I'm not saying that this is in some sensory kind of way. For some people that might be valuable, but it's for you to know, like, so here's some sensory, because at the end of the day, I have sensory at the top, right? How I came to this is at a very young, so I grew up with my dad and my brothers yelling and shouting at each other all the time. A lot of emotions, a lot of anger in the house. So when I was very young, I decided I don't want to be an angry person. Not going to do it. So my whole life I spent not engaging in my anger and blowing right past it, right? Because I built so much of how I perceive myself as somebody who doesn't get angry. And then over the past couple of years, I've realized that, hey, you know what? That actually is not very good for me. That you need to express anger.
Really?
Especially with double masculine. Are you kidding me? I really need to hit shit. Like, I really need to hit shit. But I never allowed myself to do that because I had this FI value that I don't get angry, and because I built so much of my identity around it, right? So, and that's exactly how this kind of like, this came to be, and I came to realize this, is that I need to, that node that I am not an angry person is not true, and I can't build my identity around it, right? So now everything that stems from that node of like, okay, am I allowed to feel anger? How do I relate to people who feel angry? Anger is like the utility of anger as an emotion is my boundaries have been transgressed, right? It's something that helps us assert our boundaries, which is something I've had a problem with my whole life. So, okay, so now how do I approach asserting boundaries in a way that is healthy? And like all of this shit that is attached to the singular node that now I have to reevaluate and revisit every single one of those pieces in order to see, hey, yes, this is still important and this is still a part of my identity or my, whatever that is, that network of values. Or no, this isn't serving me. I need to say goodbye to this, right? And that's that sleep processing. And that's why I've been stuck for the past 6 months, because I'm kind of like, who am I? But, I have play last, so I just need to go do shit. But instead, I'm stuck in this double activated sleep and trying to understand who the fuck am I and what's important to me so I can move forward.
I love it. Hypothetically, do you think that your doing of this process, right? So your sleep your sleep functions are both feminine, right? Yes. In your case, it's NF, but it's feminine NI, feminine FI. Do you think that this process would be easier or harder if one of those functions were masculine?
So, I think like with anything, and I think ops teaches us this better than anything else out there. There's pros and there's cons with any situation, right? So with having the double feminine sleep, it's great because like now that I've realized that anger doesn't serve me, it's really easy for me to move that because it's feminine. It's kind of like, oh, hey, you're wonderful. Thank you for what you've done for me. Now step aside. Bye. Like it's really easy to do that. For somebody who has one or both of those as masculine, it's going to be a lot harder to move any of that. So that means that when you find and encounter something that is no longer serving you and something that you build so much of your identity on, it's going to be a really challenging process of moving that. Now, the flip side of that is that I am like a leaf in the wind and my identity is all over the fucking place all the time, right? But somebody who has some masculinity in their sleep or even double masculine sleep, they're more solid. They don't blow with the winds, they just stay as they are. So pros and cons. Like for you, your journey is going to be a lot harder, especially because it's last and because you have a masculine FI. But when you do that work, it's going to be solid in how it stands or more solid in how it stands.
Yeah. No, I mean, everything that you're talking about has been my whole journey really from 2015 onward, in very, very explicit terms, because what ended up happening was I finally, so in 2015, I decided that I didn't want to live in New York City anymore.
That's when you decided?
Yeah.
Oh, you fucking IJ. It took you 4 years to move.
4 years, because so part of it is my IJ bullshit. The other part is the sleep last bullshit.
Well, yes.
Right? So, because what ended up happening is I had this feeling, this ephemeral feeling of
this isn't
serving me. Here's the thing though. I had that feeling right when Hamilton was about to peak on Broadway. It was the Hamilton hype train was boarding.
Peaking? No, I get what you're saying.
But again, look, as a person of color who raps and who is entrenched in the musical theater game, this is not the time to leave New York City. This is the absolute ST play worst time. And actually, I in a lot of ways, I actually do stand by my decision of staying not quite as long as I did. I think that, if I had really had the level of self-awareness that I wanted, if I'd done more sleep processing, I think I could have pieced out pretty confidently in August 2017. But again, I wasn't there yet, whatever. But what you're talking about, the struggle of I had not only built so much of my identity around not just the node of musical theater,
right,
which is what I thought it was.
Right.
That is not the node that I had built my identity around.
And that is the other thing, right? And that so there's there's a couple of parts to the nodes, right? There's the decider part of it, the feeling or the thinking, but there's also the organizer part of it. And that's the you think you got to whatever the intuition, the core thread is, or the sensory, but then you dig a little further and you're like, wow, was I wrong?
And what ended up happening was that I was so focused on this node of musical theater, right. I had built a lot of my identity around being a musical theater performer, being in the musical theater community. I've been doing that since I was a little kid. Great. And then once I recognized that node needed to go, obviously it took time to actually let go of that node because it was so painful. I had...
Yeah. And it usually is.
Right. Sure. Great. Fine. But there was still a bigger node that musical theater was attached to that was also no longer serving me. And that was the node of...
to figure that out.
That was the node of being a New Yorker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And realizing that no, I hadn't built my identity from a very young age around being in musical theater. I had built it around, I want to live in New York for the rest of my life.
And especially with messages if you can make it here, you'll make it anywhere, and all this other stuff. How can you not if that's your goal, right? And when everyone is telling you that, hey, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So if you can't make it in New York, then
then you suck.
Whatever it is, whatever. So there's all of this other messaging that's going on that you have to, and that's why it's sleep, right? You were taking in all of this information, but you have to filter it and evaluate what is actually true, what is in line with your values and who you want to be. Yeah. And that's where the sleep work comes in.
Yeah. So then you're a consumed sleep. You got that mope life down.
Unfortunately.
So so coming in from the other direction, as somebody who does not have savior sleep, as soon as I process one thing, as soon as a node goes away, I get really excited about ooh, I get to build new shit. And I get really excited, and then I do the thing, and then I play, and then it's great. Right?
Okay.
But I'm curious what your process is, where you get stuck in, what does getting stuck in sleep feel like to you?
So this is again, there's pros and cons, right? So earlier you had mentioned that you've known since 2015, right? That it was time to
leave New York,
or time to leave, yeah. And And even though you knew that since then, because your sleep and because your FI is not your savior, you don't feel obligated to it. It is easier to say, nah, I'll get around to it eventually. I'll get there. I'll process it. I'll eventually sit down and think about it, right?
Got it.
But you feel obligated to your blast and your play. So for me, it's the opposite. It's kind of like, I also have those things, but I feel so obligated to do that processing that I can't move on to my blast or my play until I have processed, right?
Sure.
That's where so it's like this stopper. And the only thing that if there's something that I can't NF process, sleep process, then my reaction is to go up one animal to my consume. So I end up in a consume hole.
Got it.
It's kind of like, that's where a lot of the growth comes from in terms of like telling ourselves our fears aren't real. Like this shit is not real. You feel the obligation, like you can't actually do any blast or play until you've processed everything.
Yeah.
That shit ain't true. I can go and blast. I can go and play. I might make an idiot of myself. And because blast and play are demons and I can't, I would end up feeling hugely, like when we make a mistake in our demons, it's really, really hard to bounce back from it, right? Because that's what they talk about. Like we don't accept the negativity in our demons. So I go out and blast and I make a mistake. Then I'm going to be a lot more risk averse of blasting before I'm ready or playing before I'm ready. Right. So the same thing is happening in the opposite direction for somebody like you who has sleep blast. Right. It's the same. It's that savior demon dynamic that ends up playing out with something like this and that stuck in it. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that you touch upon a really important point where the impulse for you isn't to go to it's like, I am stuck in sleep. Let me go to my third animal to maybe try to get out of it. It's let me go back up to my first animal.
Yes. And I think that's the impulse for all of us, right? Yeah. Early in the Dave and Shan's content days, like they talked about the animals as filters. And this was quite a while ago because they stopped really using that terminology around the time I joined, which was more than 2 years ago. But I still very much think of them that way in that I don't think we can skip an animal, right? So if you wanted to go and consume, you would have a hell of a time consuming something that was not in your IJ box.
Yes.
Something that's in your IJ box, you can consume it no problem, right?
Right.
Because you are savior and I. Whereas for me, I would have a hell of a time blasting about something that is not in my FI box, in my consume box, right?
Sure.
So we can't just skip our earlier animals. We do have to filter through them. And I think Dave tried to, at some point, give that analogy with the circles and stuff. It was a little awkward. He could have done better with that.
Look,
I've always kind of...
You can't win them all.
No, you can't. But I think that like the idea behind it is very much how I view it in terms of like our last animal ends up being like if you think about a filter, like actually let me water bottle filter rocks. Let's see if I can just show you guys. Here we go. If you think about, let me share my screen again. So if you think about a filter like this, right? You have, and these are your various animals. The stuff that comes out at the bottom is going to be the purest thing. So by the time you get to your last animal, you've dealt with all the other shit. So your sleep is going to be way more like hell yeah than mine is ever going to be. The flip side of that is that my play is going to be way more like hell yeah than yours is ever going to be. But I get to it so rarely, right? Because I'm always stuck in filtering things up here in the rocks or the coarse sand or the fine sand, right? Whereas, and so I very much still think of our animals as filters in that capacity. Whoops, I'm going to stop sharing. So that we can't just jump to the next filter. We still have to go through it. And I think part of the alpha journey and the hero's journey is recognizing that, hey, we're stuck in a filter and we don't need to be. And just kind of like, maybe it's like, say you have just like going back to that water filter example. You just have some water on top, and it'll slowly trickle down, right? But if you have some water on top and then you put pressure that forces the water down, it's going to go down and get to the bottom way faster, right?
Oh, shit.
So I think that's what like the Dave and Shan and the hero's journey and like all of those things are putting that pressure on ourselves and kind of acknowledging that like, hey, I don't want to get stuck in the rocks. Let me move on to the sand. Let me move on to the coffee filter. Let me move on to the next step. And then maybe I'll fuck it up and maybe it'll suck. Maybe I'll get stuck in the fine sand and not be able to keep moving further, but at least I tried. And then maybe you have to go back up a filter and try again and again and again and again.
Sure, right? Sure. Yeah, and I think that there is something to be said. I know this is deviating a little bit from sleep, but like, I think there's something to be said for a combination of more water and added pressure, and also like
well, I mean, more water is adding pressure, right? But I mean, like you can add pressure by making it a vacuum. You can add pressure by adding more water. Like but as long as there's something more pushing it down, you can increase the gravity. Like, I mean, I'm just expanding on the analogy. It doesn't make sense.
No, but I think it makes sense. And I also think that there is something to be said for, okay, if I tend to get stuck in my, like when I think I'm being productive, but I'm actually not being productive, for me, it tends to be in my consume.
Okay.
Right. So because it's sort of attached to my play, and it's a demon, and both of my demon functions are attached to my consume. So it's like, yeah, I'm doing my demons, guys. Look at me. I'm obviously kicking it, but I get stuck in the fine sand where I will sort of have these weird EP tendencies of like, no, I can't blast yet. I haven't consumed enough. I can't blast. I haven't consumed enough. Okay, maybe, but like you can sleep process. You don't. Right?
Yes.
Like there's another.
We get afraid of going to that next level because it's a demon and we're afraid of making a mistake in it because a little bit of a mistake in our demons and it's really hard to go back to it.
Yeah.
Right.
I love it.
That's a really good point. And I think kind of, Dave and Shan put a lot of emphasis on putting pressure on yourself as a way of, getting through that alpha journey. And I think there's a lot of value in that, but that's also not the only way that I think you can get through the alpha journey. Because if their approach was the only way that you could do it, then there wouldn't be nearly as many alphas as there are, right? And I think that's the example of like, you can increase the gravity or you can add more water or put it in a vacuum chamber and put pressure on that way. Like whatever it is, there's different kinds of ways. And I think given enough time, give this 5-10 years, we'll have a much better understanding of what, like, especially more of an SITE kind of understanding of like, hey, here are the steps that you can take that will work in order to get you further along in your hero's journey.
Yeah. It's funny, just to go back to the sleep, you said something that I wish that I could harness more often. And you said it so casually. And I'm like, how do you say this so casually? What you said was, 5-10 years from now. And I'm like, you have no idea what the world is going to look like 5 or 10 years from now. But in the context of this conversation about the nodes and about the connections, it's that external time just like doesn't matter, man.
Well, so like, because we have NI, so like I have a fairly solid understanding of how NI, FI, TI all work in sleep, especially in this like mind map example. But SI is still a little foreign to me. SI is because SI organizes the sensory and their sensory is like personal to them. So it's almost like facts and definitions is what their map is made of. So I don't have quite a really good, solid grasp of what their sleep would look like, SI users.
The people I have seen who have high SI sleep, there was an analogy that Shan had in one of the class videos about like a bricklayer and how the job of a bricklayer, they're not trying to build a wall. NI wants to see the whole wall. the SI is just like, I'm just gonna lay the perfect brick. It's the Jiro Dreams of Sushi. That is SI sleep.
I don't know what that is.
Okay,
but
so Jiro Dreams of Sushi. It's a documentary. 07, I want to say. I don't know why it's popping into my head.
Masculine sensory.
Whatever. But it's about the most expert sushi chef in the world in all of it, right? He's been making sushi rolls for 60 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And
he talked about the process and like how does he actually get to that true level of mastery. And he's like, the way to do it, again, this is not the only part of the movie. He talks about like, you just have to be so careful about, you just have to roll one sushi roll at a time and invest energy in making it the perfect
roll.
Roll.
Pour all that love and energy and effort.
Love and energy and wisdom
precision
into this singular dumb little
sensory
thing, right, that isn't connected to something larger. That is very much self-contained. So I did a show, again, I've talked about the show all the time. I did it was this John Denver musical, but it sort of felt like we were doing the SI kind of work, because this show, look, when you're in New York, it's about, oh, is this going to transfer to Broadway? Is my track going to get replaced by a fancy star? Whatever. No.
Yeah.
None of that mattered. All
very SI, the sensory of right now and building that.
Right. We are going to build this. This node goes here and this goes here in a very sensory, structural, concrete. And if it never goes anywhere, that's not the point. We were playing this again, it was very much about the character building game that Shan talks about a lot, of like, the thing that we're working on doesn't fucking matter. All that we care about is getting this one thing right. You know, I'm working with a student now, and he's like me. He is a slot machine, you know, when he does his math homework and misses negative signs. And I was like, oh, it's baby Raja. I love it. Here's how we fix it. And what I told him is, I was like, I'm going to be a real hard ass on you when it comes to making, like, I'm going to stop you in your tracks if you miss a negative sign, if you miss a parentheses, if you miss a comma.
Like, if I lost any points in my math classes, it was always for stupid fucking careless mistakes.
Right.
Always. It was the plus sign. It was the wrong number. Somehow when you were transferring from one place to another, the 8 became a 0. Like, all of that annoying fucking shit.
Right. And I was like, okay, so luckily for this kid, I know how to beat it out of him in a nice and loving, feminine, TE kind of way.
Of course.
And what I sort of told him at the end of this is, I was like, look, the whole reason that I'm doing it, first off, he loves it. He's totally cool that he totally sees the value. But because I'm a blaster and I have to put a fine point on everything, I'm like, look, the goal here is not to get you good at minus signs. I don't care about minus signs. Minus signs don't matter. The muscle I'm actually building in you, I didn't say is giving you SI, but it's the part of your brain that's like, okay, I am doing this one problem. I don't care about the rest of the test. I don't care about anything else. I'm going to get very tunnel vision about making this bracket correct, making sure that I write this 2 or writing this 4 so it doesn't look like a 9, right? That's the muscle. And that to me feels very SI, because it's tangible, it's concrete, it's not connected to anything else. There's no why, it's just what. It's just, what am I organizing? Where does this index card go Dewey Decimal System, right? It's the ISTJ librarian trope, or ISFJ librarian trope.
Yes, yeah.
The sexy librarians are the ENTPs. Sorry.
Wouldn't it be the ENFPs because they're the ones with the ST blast?
Maybe. I don't know. But I have a lot of opinions about the sexy librarian trope.
Oh, okay.
I have so many
Maybe
opinions.
we'll leave that for another episode.
Let's be clear, none of those have anything to do with sleep, nor are they appropriate for this channel. But
I guess it depends on what kind of sleep you're talking about.
I walked right into that one.
I thought you set me up for it.
No, I really didn't. The universe set you up for that one.
But anyway. Yeah, that was a really, I appreciate that explanation of SI, and I think that makes sense in the people that are in my life who have SI, in that it's very, they will take, I kind of see it, especially the info dominant ones, as very definition oriented.
Sure.
They need very precise definitions, and they will take a really long time to come up with the definition that I feel internally the way that you're feeling, the way that you're showing externally right now. But we need the SIs of the world. I mean, some of my closest friends are SI users, SI saviors.
My mother is Savior SI. God bless her. And here's the thing. When they have that definition, they get fantastic. Shit. And I think that's where I think that is a part of their sleep processing. And I would love to hear from you guys, especially if anyone who's listening right now has SI, pipe up. We'd love to hear from you guys. But that is what, so if it's SF sleep, right? So what are the emotions? What are the priorities? And be really, really clear in your definitions of what that means, right? Yeah. Or if it's ST sleep, then those are the ones, the NTPs of the world. Yeah. Why are they the biggest of the nerds? And I think that's because they have the ST sleep. Yeah. Excuse me. So they dig down so deep with their these are the core fundamental truths of how the world works. Here are my definitions of what the fuck a line is. Right? Because I bet you almost anything, whoever came up with the definition of a line, a point, and all those really basic mathematical and logical concepts. Yeah. That person had ST sleep. Right. Because
is my guess, ST or NT, but definitely TI.
Because let me be clear, the amount that I do not give a fuck about the definition of a line is
yes. Because for us, our TE is surface, it's up here. I'm oh, hey, great, that works. It works for me right now, great. It doesn't need to be enduring. It doesn't have to continue working in 1,000 years. Yes. Right? It doesn't have to be a fundamental truth of the universe. Yes. Unless it's an NI concept. I want to know the concepts that run throughout things. Right. But for us, our concepts, when we look at our NI, we're going to want the priorities to be the things that are the universal truths that run through. Right. So what is the most important thing what are the values that is important for a person to hold, right? What are the values I want to share with people? Those are the things that are NIFI important to us. Right. And it's funny, I want to go back to this idea of these nodes, because I think that the node map thing in the thumbnail, that to me feels very accessible from an SITI point of view. Because again, I can see it's oh, right, this bubble attaches to this if this is the definition of point, then the definition of line logically must be this, right? Yes, exactly. And I think for people who are trying to work on their sleep, if anybody would like to do this as an exercise, sit down and actually map this shit out. Yeah. And I actually bet you a lot of TIs have it mapped out. Benjamin with his, graph of ops stuff and all of that. Yeah. He needed to create that because that was the NITI of how that is a representation of his TI, and he needed to create that and organize that because that is part of how his brain needs to process that in order to see how it all comes together, right? Yeah. Whereas you and I don't need that kind of representation of it. Right. You and I need that kind of representation of our values, right? Yeah. And what's important to Raja.
Yeah. And it's a really, I have to believe that it's tricky for everybody in some ways. Again,
of course.
Just because we don't live in a culture, at least those of us in America, we do not live in a culture where sleep is particularly lauded. Right?
Yeah.
We can, whether it's a savior or we can
It's
do
like it is and it isn't.
Okay.
The actual work of sleeping, I don't know that it's lauded.
Sure.
But the outcomes of it are.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah.
There is this expectation that you should know who you are.
Yes.
Right? But how you get from not knowing who you are to knowing who you are, nobody gives a shit how you figure that out. Just go fucking figure it out. That's kind of our culture.
Yeah. And I had the big revelation, and actually it just showed up in my Facebook memories, which is why I remembered it. It was the realization of, I don't want to be on Broadway. I want to have been on Broadway.
Interesting.
Right.
That must have been really powerful.
It was not a fun day when I realized that.
Yeah, that's quite a shift.
That's
quite a shift.
That was like Wile E. Coyote getting the fucking anvil dropped on him. Like, that was not.
I've had so many of those days this year. Like 2020, like pandemic aside, has just been kicking my ass.
It's a whole thing. Well, and I think that, the people. I've seen a lot of people do some really extraordinary work during the pandemic.
For sure.
Really, I would have never expected them to make gains, personal whatever.
It's interesting. A lot of the people that I know that are fucking loving the pandemic are in your vicinity. They are TE blast players often because and especially with Demon Sensory, because they don't have to deal with the sensory and they can just stay in NT land and just be productivity machines. Yeah. No, it's really interesting.
It's been super cool. And I think that, I guess the reason why I keep harping on this external expectation, partially double activated savior play, but also, this idea of sleep, the whole reason why it was so hard for me to allow even as I know that I have to do it, I am eschewing the need, eschewing the obligation to the outside world. Okay, we're going to do the sleep thing. There's still going to be shit yelling at me from the outside world.
And it's really hard to just ignore that.
It's right. And again, whether you're obligated to it or not, eventually, you're human. And I think that why this pandemic has been so interesting, introspective, why I've seen a lot of people go through so much growth, up and down, whatever, is that there's just less external yelling that they have to fight through in order to do their sleep.
Yes, because now all of a sudden they don't have competing voices and they can actually hear their own.
Right. Which is,
what's interesting about this?
Yeah.
So Dave and Shan, I've never been a fan of their definition of introvert or extrovert. And I think in large part because it's so energy focused and energy dominant in terms of do you present as an extrovert or do you present as an introvert, right?
Sure.
A lot of the people that I've noticed who identify as an introvert or identify as an extrovert, I noticed that a lot of savior tribe people identify as introverts because spending time with people and the obligation to tribe is so taxing. And that's what a lot of what you're describing is in that capacity, because all of a sudden you aren't spending all of this time with other people, right? So you aren't obligated to all of those expectations that are so subtly being placed at your feet that you don't even realize.
Right.
The only obligation that the only obligation you're feeling is the one to yourself, or the ones that you are choosing to let in because you can so well control the information that's coming in right now.
Right. And then, oh man, that's so. Okay, I'm going to use a different analogy than what we sort of touched on this earlier. I'm going to use a different analogy of what I've been able to consume during the pandemic. So I play a lot of video games. I play a lot of video games.
Okay.
But I've been playing more video games during the pandemic than usual, but I've been doing so way more productively. And
playing video games productively.
So I've been so fucking productive. You have no idea.
Of course you have. Of course you sleep last, demon FI, IJTE, idiot, would play video games to be productive. Like,
No, but check it out. Check it out.
Anyway, yes.
Check it out. So this is actually a video that just went live today in the class. Mm-hmm. Fucking incredible. Blew my mind. Worth the price of admission for the class. They were talking about productivity. So I've been very into Shan lately. Been really picking up what she's putting down.
Shan blasting?
Yeah. Shan blasting. And it's like... just objectively, her blasting has gotten better. So, like, look, if you watch her videos from early 2019 compared to now, like when she started blasting publicly, night and day difference.
That's awesome.
It's great.
Really awesome.
But what she's been talking about lately is this idea of, like, I could never grok what she meant by the things aren't real. It's not real. The chores aren't real. And I was like, but no,
Can I just... A quick aside, that video that they posted about whether you're about decider or observer, if it's the things or not.
Yeah.
Holy hell, that video. That was so goddamn mean. Anyway, sorry. Yes, continue.
It's just so rude. Why? Why you gotta trigger me like that? But when, what she was talking about with, like, the chores aren't real, the game isn't, no, it's not. And where she sort of ended up going with it, I'm gonna paraphrase. But basically what she was saying is, like, doing the chore doesn't matter. You don't do the chore for the sake of it. You do the chore to build the character. It's just the things that you do are a vehicle for character building. And I love that coming from Shan in particular, who is lead ST play.
Yeah, and an EJ.
And an EJ, Demon OI, Demon DI, right? Demon OI, Demon DI. Being able to really see, like, oh, right, so I'm spending time on these video games. I don't care about Animal Crossing. Like, I don't, and actually, like, I started playing, like, for the first 6 weeks of pandemic, I was mono Animal Crossing. Like, that's fucking all I did. And then Animal Crossing, the game, stopped meeting my needs because I had gotten from it what I needed. Like, I had, moved on to this MMO that I'm playing, Elder Scrolls. And in both of these instances, I'm fully aware that they're not real. They don't fucking mean anything. The in-game economy, like, it's fake, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's helping me sleep process what I need to sleep process, because there isn't this competing voice of, like, you should be going out to auditions. Okay, there are no auditions to go to. They do not exist.
Yes. And if they did exist, you should still stay home and wear your mask if you go outside.
Right.
Wear your masks. But anyway.
Right. So there isn't, again, that's just like one sensory example, but it's not like the gyms are closed. I don't have the cultural voice yell that I have to ignore of, like, you should be at the gym right now, right? Yes. You should be
all of that TE stuff.
Right. It just isn't
right now is significantly quieter than it normally is.
Right. And so my sleep doesn't have to work as hard to block it out. And so I can just put together my little mind map. I'm like, okay, what node do I want? It's funny you say nodes, because that is how these units are referred to in this game, is they're referred to as nodes, as resource nodes that you have to go and mine. Right? Right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm loving this opportunity to be like, okay, what node am I going to focus on right now? What am I going to try to build? How does this node connect to that node? And once I start getting good at mining a certain kind of node, then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. As soon as I want to mine, so it's like, I'm picking fibrous plants to make clothes. Cool. As soon as I want to mine ore to make weapons, it's the same, like, I've put so much effort into understanding this node that as soon as I want to do something with this other node, I'm like, oh, I see how it attaches.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, this DI thing is important to me. I've put a lot of energy into it. This other DI thing that's disconnected from it, that also matters to me. So what is the link? Oh, the OI is the link between the two of them.
Yes. And in graph theory, those are called, I mean, there's a couple different names for it, but edges. So it's nodes and edges. That's what makes up a graph. And in the technical term, graphs are not like, I'm not talking about a chart, but a graph is what these mind maps or network things, they're called graphs. And they have nodes and edges. Yeah, exactly. So the nodes are the DI and the edges are the OI and how it all comes together. And when you get into like really technical stuff, like if you really want to just dive into this analogy and really build out your sleep in that way, your edges can be directional as well. Like they can be bidirectional or unidirectional. Like, you know, this value over here informs this other one, but the other value over here is too core and it doesn't really give a shit about this other one, right? So which direction does it go into?
Right.
That's very much, yeah.
No, it's a whole thing. And it's funny, one thing that I struggle with, it's weird. People are like, you're so good at organizing, right? Because I'm lead NI. And sure, that is true. And in some ways I'm like, yeah, I am really good at organizing for myself, but I'm all edge and no node because my FI is a single activated daemon. Right.
You're good at organizing TE nodes, right?
Right.
But those aren't going to be your sleep nodes, right?
Those are my sleep nodes, and I can do I understand the premise of organizing, right? Like I know how edges work and how to
things.
Right, and how to make things bidirectional or unidirectional or whatever it needs to be. And then, but when it comes time to be like, okay, what are we going to put? Like, where's the nodes? Why? Wait. Can I just blast play the nodes? No, you got to go consume the nodes. No, I don't want to. That's dumb. So I'm just going to have this really robust, beautifully designed framework. It's like having a lattice with no plant, right?
I think actually what you just said is a really great way of looking at NI, because NI, we often talk about NI as being process oriented, right?
Sure.
You do have that, like, all of those edges and you don't know what's going to go into it, right?
Yeah.
But the same thing as what you were talking about, like, you know, you can go mine one resource.
Yeah.
And the process of mining another resource is going to be the same, even though the thing is changing out. And that's a very NI kind of way of looking at it.
Sure.
Where SI users are going to be approaching it very differently.
Totally.
So
totally.
You build those networks, but you have no idea what's going to go into the nodes. And then when you do bring in the nodes, you might have to adjust your network.
Yeah, and that's where I get fucked up. That's what fucks me up.
And that's because there isn't the muscle of constantly revisiting it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, for me, consume sleep at the top, I'm constantly triangulating my observers in service of my FI, right? So I'm constantly, like, pinging it back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I get stuck in that loop, and that's where my problem is. I don't get out of it.
Yeah. I love what you said about revisiting. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because I'm very comfortable revisiting something that I already ST played, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, you know, I tried this thing, I played, it didn't work out. Great, let me, like, I know how to fix it. I know how to revisit it. If it didn't, like, I can check my results in reality really, really easily, pretty effortlessly. I'm like, ooh, all right, we got an 89 on that test. Let's try it again. Let's take another run at it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It is a lot harder for me to do that internally, but it is fundamentally the same idea of, like, I'm going to commit to a thing for a given amount of time, right? Mm-hmm. Work on it. Go out and try it. Okay, let's revisit this. Like, yes, I have built this thing. Yes, I am proud of what I built. I built this lovely little sandcastle.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. Let me go do something else. The muscle is, all right, let me go back to that sandcastle now that I have gone to gather or play or consume or whatever.
Yes.
And be like, do I need to adjust something? And
I think this is
yeah.
You asked earlier, I think this was one of the first things that you asked is like for people who are energy dominant, because you and I are dominant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So very much the struggle that you and I are going to have is I'm going to struggle revisiting my play more than I need to. And you're going to struggle revisiting your sleep more than you need to. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas people who are energy dominant, they're constantly going back and forth between their play and their sleep. So I think in a lot of ways they're at an advantage there because they can revisit their play and go gather. And then, oh, wait, hold on. Let me go sleep process this. Let me process. Oh, wait, I need more information. Let me go gather. Right? They can go back and forth between that dynamic a lot more easily than you and I can. So in that regard, they're going to have a much easier time I think building that kind of muscle. So I think I don't know if that helps with your earlier question in terms of how this would be for an energy dominant person.
Well, I think you just dead on answered it, right? Because it is one of the it sort of made me realize that one of the big fundamentals of OP is this concept of revisiting.
Yes.
Right?
Nothing is ever done.
Right? Like something that, and again, if we just like learn to see life as being cyclical instead of linear. I'm really loving living in Los Angeles now. God. I'm like, you can't see it, but as I've mentioned before, like I have a whole shrine with sage and a major arcana of the month, and it's a whole thing. But I think it's a valuable lesson, right? And this idea of like, once you have done something once, know that you're going to be going back to it. And that's where I got stuck, is that I would do it, like I'd sleep process a thing. And I was like, okay, I sleep processed it. We're good. I did it. Fucking lock it in. And then I'd go out and try some shit. And I'd gather more information that my sleep actually would need to know to make better edges and nodes. And then all this gathering I was just gathering. I wasn't actually going back to camp and being like, so here's the thing. Coconuts, not actually that good for you. Like, they're not that tasty. Like, we need to venture beyond the reef.
Bad example. Coconuts are fantastic. No, I know what you're saying.
I really wanted to talk about Moana, okay? But it's that idea.
I'm okay with that.
Right, but if it's like if all you're doing is, or how about this? If we really want to say it, if it's like, we're a coconut gathering island. That is what we do.
A bunch of coconuts. Sorry.
I believe that
we're a coconut gathering.
We're right. So our OIDI is based around gathering coconut. Right? We have a big old coconut gathering DI node, right? That informs all of the different parts of our culture, right? Consider the coconut. We can use the tree and the leaves and the whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's like my savior play is going out and gathering all these and getting all this information of like, the coconuts are rotten. And then just not going back to sleep and being like, hey, so coconuts are rotten and they're not working for us, right? It's like, do you sort of see where I'm going with this analogy?
I do. I also think that it's, I see where you're going with the analogy. I think the example is a TE example rather than an FI example. Because, and that's a very kind of like, so I think what you're describing is NISE triangulating for the purposes of TE. I mean, okay. I might just be
nitpicking. No. Go ahead.
Versus like NISE triangulating for the purposes of your FI, right? Because like, for example, coconuts is like TE, sure. Like taking care of practical
doing the gathering,
right? But the FI would be like, so to go back to your earlier examples of like, the anvil that dropped on you, realizing that you don't want to be on Broadway, you want to have been on Broadway.
Right, sure.
Right? Realizing that. And then, okay, so there was sensory information that must have triggered that. And then taking that and bringing it back down to your sleep processing. And now that you have that sleep processing and you have that information that like, oh, actually, I don't want to be on Broadway. I want that to be in my history. I want that to be on my resume. I want to have had that experience, but the actual experience is not what is valuable to me. Okay, so now how do I update my map? How do I update my nodes? What happens to the edges that are attached to this idea? Like, and then you have to update all of that.
Right. Sure. So then would you say that you, as somebody who is a consume sleep, right? You have save your sleep. Would you say that you are more actively looking to update that internal world?
Of who I am?
Yeah.
Nonstop. Like, nonstop. I cannot stop. It's so fucking annoying. I think I was talking to Josh about this just yesterday. And this is one of the ways that I think ops is so fascinating and so great, because it helps you understand that the way that your brain works is not the default, and other people's brains don't work like this.
Sure.
So save your FI, double activated FI, right? So, and SE at the top. So anything that comes into my world, any sensory that I gather, I'm constantly nonstop evaluating it and judging it on priority, right? Nonstop. So one of the ways that takes form is anytime that I meet somebody, especially because I'm, very single, 33 single for most of always. And so a lot of the people that I meet, it is this nonstop evaluation of, ooh, am I interested in them? Ooh, are they cute? Ooh, do we have a connection? Ooh, this or that, because this FI concept or like this FI thing that I want, this like connection with finding a person, that kind of commitment, building a life with them, all those things that I want, right? So every sensory that comes in is constantly pinging for that. The flip side of it, and this is something that Josh was sharing with me yesterday, is that, and he's got, he's double feminine U, so he's got the double activated TE. And for him, it's like he's with somebody for like months, and then afterwards his FI will catch up and be like, oh, am I enjoying this? Is this important to me? Right? Yeah, exactly.
I hate it.
It's so like with anything else ops related, there's strengths to it and there's weaknesses to it. So in the case of this, like me constantly nonstop evaluating whether I like something or not makes me such a slave to my emotions. That it's just utterly exhausting. And so just like, for once, I would not, like my big journey, like when I find a way to really fucking handle this, I will just be completely unstoppable. To be able to tell my FI, hey, listen, shut the fuck up. I'm going to do this thing because this thing needs doing. Right? Because my FI is constantly, you don't want to do this. No, you like this. You don't like this. You're feeling pain. You're angry. You're doing this. It's like all this nonstop, like prioritization, right? And being able to shut that up is really hard. And that's what the NIFI sleep is like. It's constantly hearing that SCFI, like and then the NIFI constantly looking for the NI threads that run through things. So one thing that Jessica's really liking what I'm blasting about right now. That's it's really nice. I'm glad some people are on. But so one of the things that is just like fucking annoying as shit is constantly, now that I'm not a kid anymore, like when I was in my early 20s, I moved abroad, I was traveling, I was having a lot of fun, just taking in all this new sensory experiences, right? I've had all of these sensory experiences. I found the NI threads that run through the ones that I like. And now there's this like sadness and grief almost to like, is there any more new sensory for me to consume? Because technically there's new sensory, right? But I see the NI threads that runs through everything that I like. So it's not really new sensory anymore. Like, even though I have SE at the top, but the double activated NI. And that's kind of like, that sucks. And so that's one of those, like, it's one of those things that my brain is constantly nonstop trying to understand, trying to evaluate, trying to process. And so I never get around to the blast. And I get around to blasting in like conversations like this, right? Sure. But playing, like, I've been trying to build an objectively typed website so fucking long. Have you seen it yet? No. That's because I have Play Last. Like, yes, I'm well aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to talk about this idea of obligation. Because again, I think that, as a way to sort of tie all of this stuff together, because, the ops thing is like, if we're not doing anything with it, like if it's not, if we're not on some sort of journey, if it's not being used as a map, then like, what are we doing?
Yeah, why bother with it?
Right. So
we're so TE.
What are you gonna do? But like, this idea of obligation really is a thread that runs through all of objective personality.
Yes. And it's possibly one of the hardest concepts to really get and understand and own. Like that one takes quite a while.
Right. Like what is
obligation?
Right. And especially distinguishing between what we perceive to be obligation and just like amount of noise that eventually fucking something is going to get through and derail. Right. And again, whether it's, if I'm blasting about something, like, yeah, sure, I don't want to consume. I don't feel obligated to consume, especially not when I'm blasting. But if I have 1 million people in chat yelling at me, eventually something is going to get through, right? Even though I'm not obligated to it, it's going to happen. So I'd love to hear about your experience, specifically tying obligation and your understanding of what obligation really means to sleep. I'm mostly asking this question for selfish reasons because I want to build that sense of obligation in myself. And so I'd love to hear you talk about how and why it comes so effortlessly to you.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, what is my relationship to my obligation to sleep?
Yeah. How is
that replicable?
Yeah. How do you see your obligation to sleep? Like, how do you feel that obligation to sleep?
It's, in my typing video, one of the things that I mentioned was that my brain never sits still. There is no silence in my brain. Like, and I think this is strongly modality related. I know at one point there was conversation around this on Facebook and stuff, but I think having people who are double masculine or audio, we have a monologue in our head, right? Versus people who have feminine sensory, they don't necessarily have a monologue running in their head. They might think in other ways. Sure. So with my masculine sensory, I have a monologue in my head, and it is never silent. Like, it's just never silent. There's never a break in it. There's always a constant evaluation and analysis of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And the analysis in this case, and I think this is probably common for other people as well, but the analysis in my case is a priority analysis, not a does this work analysis.
Sure.
And then there's also a constant foot on the brakes.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily pushing the brakes, but my foot is always there ready to hit it if it needs to, right?
Yep.
Sometimes literally that's how I drive too. But that kind of like, I just, oh, are you sure you want to say that? Or, oh, hold on a second. Before you say those words out loud, rephrase it in your head. So that's kind of like, so that obligation to, it's hard to describe it as something more than just like that voice inside of my head. Sure. And I actually think, I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but one thing that I've noticed, a lot of people who I know who have issues with substance abuse, mm-hmm. especially alcohol, mm-hmm. tend to be sleep last. And I think one of the reasons is because we all have that voice in our head. Yeah. But when we, with alcohol more specifically, but other substances as well, it's just a really easy way to tell that voice to be quiet.
Yeah.
right?
No,
Whereas I can't. Like, I want to tell that voice to be quiet, but since I moved to California, I think I have been drunk, like where I just like really drunk once. A couple of times when I had like some good drunk nights, but like drunk where I think I took it a little too far.
Sure.
Once. That was actually right before the pandemic hit.
Sure.
And that is 100% because I had moved into a new place and with roommates, with people who I've been friends with for a long time and roommates that I love and trust. And I knew that I could allow myself to take my foot off the brakes because there were people in my environment or there was something in my environment that I could trust that would hit those brakes for me in case I didn't. So that obligation to it is like, even if I'm not like taking responsibility for it, I'm also still taking responsibility for it because if I'm not doing it, somebody else I trust is.
See, that's beautiful to me. That just feels really healthy, right? And this idea of it really does.
I mean, I'm really glad it comes with its own problems and it comes with its own challenges, right?
Well, no, but specifically this idea of like, I'm taking responsibility for all of my parts. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to handle everything myself. Like you being responsible for something includes outsourcing it to someone that you trust.
Yes, 100%.
I'm an enormous believer in that.
Delegation, and like I think Dave and Shan talk about it. It's like, sure, like Demon Blast. I'll export my blast to I did.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I did with this channel.
Well, literally, right.
But in the event that is not possible, I'm still taking ownership and responsibility for making sure that it happens.
Exactly.
Right? Or to handle it in some way. And I think that is the radical ownership kind of part that Dave and Shan allude to, but that exists in a lot of other areas of the self-help world, not just ops.
Yeah.
In terms of take ownership for your shit.
Yeah.
That means delegating it, but if somebody fails at delegating it, it's your fault.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that it's really easy to get into this mindset. I mean, again, it's certainly a mindset I fell into. Is once you realize if you delegate and it doesn't get done, it's still your fault because you're the owner, right? It becomes very easy to be like, oh, well, then I'll just do everything myself.
And that's one of the things that Sleep likes to do, I notice.
Well, I don't trust them to not fuck it up. So I'm just going to do it all and take it all on and then burn myself out, not pace myself.
And I think we all do that. And I think that's when Dave and Shan talk about we take responsibility for our saviors.
Yeah.
That's that element of like, I'll take responsibility for sleeping, right?
Right.
And the interesting thing is like in the case of sleep where you think it's something that's very personal, but I also take responsibility for sleeping for everyone, and which is, I know.
If you could take a nap for me, that would be amazing.
But like, how many of our conversations have been me like asking you about your FI, the sensory of your FI, and then poking at the NIFI, right, at the threads that are running through it, and how often like I'm a therapist for my friends, right? Yeah. And that's a role that I really enjoy and helps me build relationships and stuff. But it's because I like when I feel stuck on my NIFI and I don't want to process my shit, I'm going to go find someone and process their shit instead. Because then I can still do my savior, but not take any responsibility for my own crap.
Nailed it!
So like, and that's where that kind of like responsibility thing comes from and taking on, and sometimes too much, and you can't, you have to, and again, tied right back to our addiction to our saviors, right? Yeah. Sometimes just step back. That's one of the, like, I mentioned drawing boundaries earlier as something that's been a challenge for me. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've had to, my instinct, my default wiring, anytime I see someone's FI in trouble, I want to jump in and figure out the NIFI and like the whole fucking mess of whatever's going on. I want to untangle it just quickly pull it all apart and figure out that mind map, all those nodes and edges, and how all of that comes together for that person.
Right.
That's what I want.
Right. And as somebody who has NIFI last, I'm like, I'm not ready to hang on. I'm working on it. I am in the process of untangling. I got to go through a couple other loops first, but like, I'm getting to it. I have to do this on my own.
Yes.
I can't just.
So we know your relationship with feminine sensory.
It's a girl.
No, but we all have to get there on our own, whatever,
right.
However long that takes in whatever form. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have Kanye comes to mind in the class that they did on Kanye, where like he's on an interview and he's talking to someone and he's sleep processing his whole way through because he doesn't know how to take responsibility for that on his own time.
Yep, that's
so
amazing.
He forces the people in his life to take responsibility for it.
Right, and hey, create this. And again, I very much do this too on my personal Facebook page, on this fucking channel. Like, it's a lot of me being like, I don't know how to sleep process entirely on my own. So let me create an environment.
If that's what you gotta do, then that's what you gotta do.
Right?
Yeah.
In which to actually that's even
what
just
therapy is.
Yeah.
And how many of us rely on that?
Yeah.
Save your sleep over here, and I certainly see a therapist. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's really important to have that, because otherwise, I think of. So I love John Mayer. I don't know what he's been officially typed as, but I definitely get, sleep, consume, sleep. Mopey vibes. And he's got a song called "My Stupid Mouth." It's a great song. Side note, for those of you musical theater lovers, Audra McDonald also covered "My Stupid Mouth," so you should check that out. The point is, the whole thing is him being like, "My stupid mouth, it got me in trouble," and he's on this date and he's totally in his head the whole time, and he's not actually I was going somewhere with this. He's doing all of this internal processing, right? But he's not actually taking responsibility for, hey, I'm on a date, like I'm with another human in the room right now. Like there's play energy that needs to happen that I am putting the entire burden of play energy on her so that I can just be in my own shit.
I'm quite familiar with that.
Right?
Yeah. And we all do that too. And it's the, the play lasters were very much the, oh, can you do that for me? Shit, And like when I was working on the objectively typed website, and I had a group of people I was working with, and Brian was one of them, who's your double feminine twin. And Brian has always been really good on it's like, V, just stop navel gazing and go do the thing. Right? Like, sure. That's what he calls it. Like, stop sleep processing and just go do some fucking play. Right? Go interact. Go expend the energy. And just do the thing. Yeah, just do the thing. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's the flip side of that water bottle filter analogy that I was talking about earlier, where, what comes through at the bottom, the water, that is the cleanest, the purest form of it.
Sure.
The flip side of that is that, like, we all want to do our last animal right. We're all rather perfectionistic with our last animal, right? Because we can't deal with the negativity of our demons. So for you, with your consume and your sleep, right? Any negativity that comes through it is going to be hard. It's probably a lot less negativity with consume just by nature of the animal than there is with negativity that comes with sleep. But so when we do get to our very last animal and we do experience some negativity, it's hard. It hurts. It hurts us deep, right? So we become these perfectionists as regards to our last animal. So like play last over here. If I'm going to bother spending the energy to do a thing, you're going to damn well make sure that it's going to be good.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And for you, I would assume, like, if I'm going to bother doing the sleep work and I'm going to actually stop and slow down and listen to what the fuck is going on in my head, you're going to damn well be sure I'm going to do it right. Or as Evelyn puts it, I'm going to have my prayer beads and I'm going to have my little place to meditate and all of that. Whatever form works for you. Like, I think it's one of the reasons why early on, like I initially typed myself as Save Your Play. My initial typing was Consume, Play, Blast, Sleep. That's what I thought my type was.
Okay.
Or Play, Consume, Blast, Sleep. I don't remember. But one of the reasons was because of this attention that I have on everything has to be done right. When I play, it has to be done right. Right?
Right.
But that's coming from a place of being afraid of making mistakes where my play is concerned, being afraid of expending that energy, quote, unnecessarily, and that energy being wasted instead of efficient the way that Save Your Sleep wants to make energy use.
Right. And like, I can blast, like, and again, it's the, I have friends who will like, I have something really important to say. So I wrote it out word for word so I could really take the time to make sure that I blast correctly.
Yes.
Whereas I'm just like, just tell me. It can be, you can be wrong. You can blast incorrectly. I don't give a shit.
I had to jot down some notes for this little blaster video, which is already an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Because for that very reason. For me, it was an outline because NI, and it's not my last one. But yeah, that like,
right. It's just, right. And being able to go, yeah, if I can blast and it can be good. Look, I want it to be good because I'm obligated. You know, that's my role in the tribe. I want it to be good, but it could be 80 to 85%. That's all I need. Right.
Yeah.
And the play, 80 to 85%. It's got that masculine SE at the bottom. So I want it to be really.
If you get burned by it, you're okay. You're like,
right.
Okay, that happens.
Right. And again, I guess just to end on this analogy of the water bottle, to sort of bring it full circle. When you first start getting those first little droplets of that last animal, there just isn't that much water. So any impurity, any little grain of sand in that is going to take up a lot of real estate.
Yes. Oh, that's really well put.
And then, but over time, as you put more water in, as you put more pressure, as you build that last animal, as you build that reservoir, the aquifer, all right, you got a little silt in there. What are you going to do?
That's okay. Yes. And I also think this is one of the reasons why, you know, if you're energy dominant and you have your play and your sleep in your top 3 animals, it's going to be easier for you to revisit the demon than it is for us who are info dominant. And that's because in order for you to revisit your sleep, that means you're going to have to take that water that has already gone through all 4 layers and gotten to the bottom, and you have to pour it back into the top. Right? And that's hard.
I hate it. Interview over. No, it's done. Stop. Shut up. I hate it. You're mean. You're the worst friend I've ever had. How dare you?
Love you too, Raja.
V, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. I hope that all of you out there, whether you are Save Your Sleep, Demon Sleep, have a deeper understanding of sleep, but also how sleep relates to OP overall, and how, like, by really exploring one function and really owning and understanding one function, you can see a lot of the concepts of OP. It really does relate to all of the other ones. So, V, is there anything else that you want to say about your sleep, about,
you know,
thoughts for the people at home?
It's one of those things that one of the struggles that's been happening this year for me is like hating my saviors. I'm so goddamn tired of my savior sleep and feeling obligated to it. But at the same time, you know, the flip side of it is like, I love it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm the person I am because of it. And I kind of like who I am, so yeah.
Yeah.
But like, the point is, we all have, there are strengths and weaknesses that come with all parts of our type. No matter what you have as a savior, there's going to be things that are huge advantages to it and things that are going to be weaknesses and challenges. And that's what ops is all about.
Yep.
Bring all of that into better alignment.
I love it. V, thank you so much for coming on the show. It is really good. It's really good to
jump in.
Yeah, look, I it's good to see your face. You know, you started the channel. You know, I'm glad that people get to know who you are, especially recently. And I'm glad that you have, you know, put in the time to do the sleep processing and to work shit out. And I'm glad that you came to Blast Play out here with us today.
Yeah, I'm really glad we did this. Just FYI for people, Evelyn and I are going to do an episode sometime in mid-August because it will be 2 years that we've both had our type. And we just kind of wanted to pop on and be like, hey, what the fuck's going on in your life? So we'll be doing that. I think we have it scheduled for the week of August 10th, tentatively, but we'll let you guys know.
Love it. I can't wait to see it.
It's been so much fun to do this. I've missed this.
I missed it too. All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.